So my big aha moment was the connection I made between media literacy and the influence of culture. So to kind of give, I guess, a definition of media literacy, um, would be being able to decipher the different media forms that one can receive information, and being aware that there are other factors that come into play when you're reading the news. Whether you're reading news or really any kind of content you're consuming, um, media literacy is about being aware of who's creating the content and maybe what biases they have, maybe how much control they actually have of their content. Is it being analyzed by someone else? Is it supervised by someone else? Media ownership, um, all of that. Um, because whether you're reading an article from a magazine or watching a show on TV, with the show, it has a network that it's on, and so it's important to take the information, but also understand that some of the perspectives that are presented on TV shows on a specific network come from the people that are running that network. Same with magazines, for example. You read an article in a magazine, whether it be online or actually in print, you have to remember that there's editors, there's um, other people having to review that information and structuring in a certain way to have a lot of people read it, or in TV for ratings, things like that. So what I found was the connection between media literacy and culture, but I would say specifically pop culture. I want to touch on pop culture a little bit when it comes to kids and specifically millennials, how it affects them, because pop culture, the word sounds vague, or it sounds shallow. It sounds like it's not something to really concern oneself with, maybe even a little frivolous. But I think that this kind, like pop culture, mass culture, this kind of consumer culture, does have a powerful impact on people. So Dr. Ozit talked about it. He's about cultural influence. He says the norms and the values of the culture dictate how children behave and what parents reinforce in order to produce well-adjusted adults who function independently. Um, and I think this is true. In pop or consumer culture, kids are always hearing what to wear, what not to wear, what to buy, what not to buy. And this is where media literacy could come in and really help. Because again, certain websites or celebrity, commercials or films or anything like that, can, have an agenda, can have a message. Especially advertising. Advertising, the whole goal is to tell you what you need that you don't already have. But again, it's important to realize that there's other motives at hand than just presenting a product or presenting an idea. Um, maybe the company's main goal is to make money. They make a product, they want to make money. So that's going to influence their content, their decision making. Um, and I think that's where it's important to have media literacy. I think it's a tool that's not talked about as much, especially. But I think it's especially important because I think that it can develop, critical thinking skills. It's not, you're not just kind of, taking information and looking at it at face value, or it's going one ear and out the other. You're actually presented with some information, but how to decipher it. You're actually examining it, analyzing it. Um, and I think media literacy is another really important concept, because when reading content, especially like political stories or anything like that, it's important to rely on fact. And I think sometimes people might rely on feeling too much. And again, media literacy can kind of have more of a balance. I understand people have emotions, but you need to think of where it's coming from. And especially in like films that definitely have maybe a political message or just a deeper message in general about society and societal norms. It's important to realize that while a person sees these, a character go through a journey and can connect, and they can get some, again, they can get the message out of it. It's one person's perspective. It's the director or the producer's perspective. And it might not rely on fact. It might rely more on feeling because you're connecting with the character. Again, which is understandable, but it's important to note and to realize I'm connecting with this character, but I don't have the facts at hand to say that this is 100% unbiased, just information being told at me. I also want to kind of touch on how I said this specifically. I think pop culture affects millennials and youth, and I really think it does because I think young people have become really defined by this consumer mass pop culture. Again, I find a quote from Dr. Ozit. He says, to some degree, culture affects entire stages of development. For example, adolescence as we know it is characterized by rebelliousness and turmoil, whereas where it is a stage of development in other cultures that is characterized by the ability to develop hunting and survival skills. And I think this is really interesting because I know when I think of youth culture, I think of a very cynical, defiant, pessimistic type of view. And I think that it's trying to display a lot of frustration that millennials and young people might have with their surroundings, with their environment, with some societal norms they can't believe are norms. And culture has a really easy way of sharing this, and it's fast and it's accessible. I always think of like films that are kind of supposed to be teenage films. I think of movies like Mean Girls, for example. I think of movies like Heather's, the big one, where high school is not presented as just a place of education where you learn. It's presented very adult and very mature, and it's seen almost as like this vicious jungle where kids learn about hierarchy and popularity, and they learn that sometimes the popular kids don't have to have some deep story behind their motives. Sometimes they're just cruel because they are. And I don't even I hesitate to even to say honestly it's a millennial thing now that I think about it. I think it's more almost just a young people thing because I feel like culture has done this. Pop culture has influenced youth culture before. You have movies back like in the 50s with Rebel Without a Cause, where that was one of the movies to me is an epitome of teenage angst, of trying to tell people, hey, I'm frustrated, I just want you to listen to me. So I think my question would be, even though pop culture, again, that does delve into, movies and celebrities and maybe, again, things that don't seem very important or seem very superficial. I wonder if they are superficial, honestly. I mean, I think about conversations that I have in life, and it's a lot of times about pop culture, things you're like, especially in my social life. I love talking about movies, love talking about art and photography and all that. And my interest in those things define me, and I think that's a big element that I had talked about previously. I guess my question is, what defines you? What really defines you? And even though pop culture can have negative effects, I wouldn't want it to go away. I think it can really shed some light on a lot of different aspects of society. It can highlight injustices, it can highlight the frustration of young people. It has the power to do so much, and I do think in the end, and another question I can pose is, do you think that this mass consumer pop culture should be viewed in more of an academic light? I know I definitely do. And again, my just aha moment would just be more of a realization that I think I think culture um, is a defining tool for young people. So that's my aha moment. Thanks.